So hello everyone and welcome to this panel discussion around cloud automation. My name is Ricardo Castro and I'm from Porto, Portugal, and I'm here joined by my colleagues. I'll let them introduce themselves, so feel free to jump in and just give a brief introduction, who you are, what you do, and some curiosity that you'll find it would be interesting for our audience, so feel free.
All right, cool. Then I will go next. My name is Max Körbecher. I'm co-founder of Liquid Reply. We practically do platform engineering as a service, as a consulting, as an advisory, everywhere on any kind of cloud agnostic. That's for us the way to go. So when I'm not working on these topics, then I'm being part of the CNCF ambassador program, running the technical advisory group for environmental sustainability, and also recently joined the Linux Foundation Europe as an advisory board member. So all hats in open source.
Nice. I'm Lucas Oberhuber. I'm co-founder and CTO of hiphops.io, and we're helping platform engineers in making the release process better and helping with automation, because existing CI/CD is slow to build, slow to run, and really forces you to do all kinds of hacky stuff. So that's what I'm doing. And then the interesting fact is I also maintain GIMP for the Mac, which is the open source photo editor, not Photoshop, sorry. And that's also has a big CI/CD component to it. So why I focus on that. It's just a passion of mine.
I guess it's just me now. My name is May Baseround. I'm from Israel. I'm a platform engineer or DevOps engineer or both at Forder. I've been a backend developer for over 6 years before that. I'm also a public speaker, and I do a lot of workshops on DevOps and functional programming. Currently, I'm leading the migrations to Kubernetes at Forder. We have 420 services to migrate. We're pulling through. We have 120 developers to work with, split into 20 teams. And yeah, it's a great party out here.
Awesome. That sounds like a lot of fun. So migrating services to Kubernetes and all the cloud native. So I would like to start, and I see that we have a lot of people here speaking about platform engineering. So with that lens in mind, and about platform engineering, what for you does cloud automation sound like? What does it mean to you actually in that scope? And we can start with you, May, just because you were the last one. So now I will put you on the spot and give you the first slot for you to share your vision.
So I think the first thing that I think about, and actually I've discussed this with Lucas just in his talk. The first thing that jumps to my mind is the fact that it's platform engineering, which means that we serve the developers. So we want to make sure that we actually help them get to do their work better. And we also want it to be easy for them, relatively easy for them to do those changes. And one of the things that I learned was that if I was just a backend developer for a product that is like outwards facing, not internal product, then there are no implementation details in the feature requests. But when I'm doing something internally, I do want to share some implementation details with the developers to ask them, do you find this easy to use in the infrastructure as code that we have? Do you think that this would be better? And so I do a lot of collaboration, asking them for their opinions. Obviously, I do that in some, specific points, not on every loop and every function name, but like general ideas, APIs, maybe some tech stack that they would prefer over the other. And I think that's the main difference that I've experienced between developing outward, products and internal products.
Awesome. So Luca, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I a little bit forgot your initial question, but if I think about platform engineering, I think surveys are showing that it's about 22% of developers are now platform engineering. So it's it's one of the fastest growing areas in tech. And there's a couple reasons. Well, the main reason is complexity, right? What we can build now versus what we could build 10, 20 years ago has gotten so much more complex. like HA built in, many services, many databases, all the different things that we can do now, the kinds of applications we can build and the speed with which we can build them has gone up massively. What's not gone up well enough is the tooling. And so we're still really suffering, especially in platform engineering, with quite what I would call outdated tooling. Right? It's not a developer experience. It's not, I can test locally. I can, like everything's done in live. And, even, as my co-founder said, using Terraform is a little bit like deploying a neutron bomb. You just don't know what's going to happen. And all of those things are problematic. So, this is a really important space. And then, to May, what you were talking about, to work with the team, your customers are there. You're also a bit of a customer of the system. That makes that easier, but it can also make it harder because, like people can lobby you, right? And people can go, I want this, I want that. Now, to be fair, even for external facing features, the same thing is going on. Like the product manager's going, I want to do this one versus that one. But still, there's I think it's just an incredibly exciting place to be. And I personally really want to improve the tooling. And I think there's a lot of room for improvement there. And then that improves the tooling for developers.
Yeah, I think this is also like quite interesting times because we see a lot of paradigm shifts. And when we think about the way of how the automation to cloud, where we come from was like hacky scripts, which like do some kind of weird calls on APIs, and then you use the cloud provider native version. Then you can have Terraform, which is the cloud native version of it. Now you think about like, actually you do not want to touch this anymore because it's like, hey, why I cannot just tell simply what I want to have, and then it creates the best practice in every shape. So you see like movements, especially we work a lot with Kubernetes, like using control plane instead of Terraform because I don't care, right? And I have people in my team which say like, I really don't want to work that much with the cloud provider itself because it's incredibly boring. I make API calls and I get the stuff. But I do not want to go into all those little details. Who cares about the network segmentation and whatsoever? Yes, for some enterprises, this might be relevant. But for most companies, it's actually not that relevant. It's like I have my more or less kind of infinite range of IP addresses internally. And the few 5 services which needs to be out-facing, I can get somewhere else the traffic to. So this is, I think, something where we're handling around. But I like Lucas' perspective on it to say like, well, there are so much movement in these directions, and on the other hand side, it's pendling back and forth, right? Like there's like all this CDK development toolkits for coding infrastructure, and it's like why we have to go back, why we need to write code again, then to make out of this infrastructure as a code, which you then can apply against the cloud provider. And it's like, oh, because we were faster. No one wants to write the 180,000 lines of Terraform. That's true, but why I need to write repetitive code? It's like a way back. Why we don't go way more further? Why I don't have just an API which tells me like make the best HA available database for, and it needs to be shut down in the evening times. It needs to be shut down on the weekend, and then you get your setup without complexity. So I think there's a very, very big room of improvement. And I think also that this in the platform engineering perspective, it's quite interesting because you need to teach organization again, like, look, we can move fast, we can automate a lot, but we still also do a lot of infrastructure. And it is not that fast and snippy and reactive as you want to have it, like with writing code and functions. Also, as Lucas said, we can, in a code environment, like just write our functions and test it locally fast, no problem. We can also test it with a huge backend running somewhere else and have similar local development, also cool. But what I never can do is test locally my infrastructure. And I'm looking forward to see what will be there. I think there are some kind of emulators missing in cloud providers, for example.
I kind of want to say something. Like you mentioned CDK and said like why go back. So I want to present. I think it's a unique situation. Maybe it's not, and you can tell me otherwise. But I believe that what we have, at least it was unique a few years back when they started at Forder to write using CDK. It's actually Python DSL that is doing all of the cloud resources configuration. And that's because we have a multi-cloud environment. We have both Azure and AWS. We have multiple accounts, multiple regions, and multiple environments. And this way, when they used this Python code, they were able to do a lot of abstractions from the users, and then, but also allow the users to dive deep if they want. When users, I mean developers. So at Forder, you can see that some developers, they complain that they don't get enough ability to change everything. They're like, let me in more. And I'm like, don't you have another job to do? But no, but seriously, so there are those developers, but then they are like 25%. But the rest of the developers, they are in the end of like, just like you said, I want to tell you what I need and just do it. I don't care about the security group. I don't care about the target group. I don't care about which load balancer it's going to be. I just want it to work, and you go ahead and choose the instance type. So this is like where we're at right now, and we started adding Backstage as it's by Spotify, and this is like the middle grounds that we're trying to hit. But it's always like trying to balance between allowing the developers to do whatever they want and allowing them not to do anything, you know.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, and it's something that I would like to ask you guys, because it's something that I struggle with every day. So exactly what you just said, mate. But we also have use cases that it's not the developer that it doesn't want, he needs to. So we have this will be highly dependent on context. So we do have teams that it's like, I want to use something like an Heroku, right? Like I just push my code and it's like it needs a MySQL database and I need to scale horizontally, and that's it. But we have other workloads who are very sensitive, both in terms of resources, CPU, memory, because, for example, they have huge in-memory data structures that like operate in a cluster that if one node goes down, a whole rebalancing. So just restarting and adding a new node to the cluster is not like a very simple and it's a costly operation. So we're trying to navigate that complicated scenario, or on the one hand, we have developers that I really don't care. It's like, this is Dharma requirements, it's fine. And we have other developers that are like, okay, I really care because it will influence the way that my application works. So my question is more about, in terms of abstraction, what do you guys think it's like kind of sweet spot? And I know this is a highly contextual answer, but I would like to get your opinion because I struggle with this. So if you guys can help me, it will be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, me too. I'm waiting for the answers.
I think there's no sweet spot on it. That's the most difficult part, because it's like, to be honest, I have the feeling that most is a very, very bad word for it, but that many people who work in the context of cloud still do not understand cloud. And you cannot understand because look at services from the big cloud providers. They have 250, 300 different services. Each service gets around 15 updates per year in average. I had a time in my career where I was only dedicated to one cloud provider, and I still did not get anything of it continuously. And then you add, as I said, all this layer of abstractions on top of it. Like, only if you think about Kubernetes and the whole environment around, so there's a couple of hundreds projects in addition. And I mean, it's one of the strongest development community globally with more than 200,000 individual contributors. So what a cloud provider is doing is crazy, and there's a lot of movement, but it's a joke in comparison to what the open source world is doing and innovating. And this is just one little selection or section out of it. From many other open source communities, which I even do not have inside, right? I think the sweet spot, or where you actually want to get your team, but also your organization, is on the one hand side to find a team which has a commitment and the interest to work on these technologies, because then you can give them also the freedom to teach themselves and test out things by themselves and find best solutions which suits for your case. But where many organizations, from my perspective, are failing is like, oh, can you make a one-day Kubernetes training? And I'm like, well, give me 2 weeks, and maybe your people are good enough to do it without a failure But then we need to add, for every tool which you want to add, at least 2 days, 3 days on top of it. And they're like, yeah, but I don't have time to give them a month of training. I'm like, this is the world. This is how fast it is. It's not like that you once install the servers and then the next update comes in 1 year or 2 years.
I think that, just to sort of go to your question of, how do you find the sweet spot? I don't think there's an answer, because as you say, it's moving so fast. And I think all I can say is the tooling hasn't kept up, right? Which is I don't know what the tooling needs to keep up where. I'm certainly, tackling a part of it with my company, in the CI/CD space. But I think each area needs its own leaps forward. Like as an example, just talking about Terraform, it ends up being a very, very thin layer over these APIs. It's a declarative layer. It doesn't actually guarantee that what's been declared works, right? And so you're even though it's an abstraction, it's not really an abstraction. And it's sort of like you're telling someone else to do something, but that other person just does it automatically for you, right? But you don't actually, so even though it's setting it to the correct state, it doesn't guarantee that correct state is a good state. And I think the leap that's in my head, we've got generative AI, which can really help in, generating some of these things, but those are also not necessarily correct. The leap I think of is a bit like moving from managing your own memory in C to automatic memory management. It's not perfect for everyone. Some people need to use Rust instead, but it solves the problem for most people, just like Python versus C. It takes away a whole layer of problems that you don't have to worry about. And I think Heroku was the right idea in that direction. But what we need to use, all the tools out there are so much broader now that that's just not good enough, right?
Yeah, and Kelsey Hightower has that famous sentence where it says that most companies, what they want is an Heroku version, but they want to build it themselves, right? So they want to be the ones developing their Heroku. So, and recently I read an article from Vercel where they start popularizing this idea of the infrastructure framework-based infrastructure, where based on the framework that you're using, both be it internally or something that exists on the industry. I don't know, for example, you say you have like a Rails app, for example, and it's usually using like a MySQL database. So the infrastructure is automated because it knows that based on that kind of framework and that kind of code, they guess what should be on the back end. Of course, then you can change, and it goes down to the path of Heroku again, right? It's basically, okay, this is my code. Can you please just get it running? So do you think that at least in some use cases that's an approach that actually makes sense? For example, within my company, we have several frameworks and things that we're using. It could be something that we key advertise. Like if you're using a Java app that's using a Spring and a Cassandra backend, we already know what to set up underneath the covers. If you guys think that that's a sensible approach, do we need something a little bit different? What do you guys think about it?
Well, I would go one more step further. I would say most companies, most enterprises don't need a cloud provider, to be honest, because 80% of the application is so simple, so easy to run, that they do not have any special requirements. Like we have a couple of customers having thousands of applications, maybe 85% of it could be handled by scripts itself, because there's no complexity in it. It needs somewhere to run a container with a web server on it. It maybe requires a database. Yeah, there should be maybe a load balancer, then you execute the container twice, but you don't need a cloud provider for it, to be honest. You could run it on DigitalOcean. Yes, this is also kind of cloud provider, but they're still searching for a provider which makes it simple, which it makes like everyone could execute it, because I think that's what is needed. And then you have like the next 10%, which is like specialized solutions, specialized topics where you really need an expert for it. Like you have machine learning, big data. Okay, you need them. You need to fulfill requirements dedicated to the compute, to graphics, to storage. And then you have maybe like 5% left, which is like business critical. If this solution stops working, the business is screwed. It's a basically kill a whole company if this applications would not run. So I think we should rather focus on the last 15% and put all the energy there. And this is where cloud providers are perfect. And for the other 85%, I believe you can find any other kind of nice platforms, which makes it more easier, more simpler, so that there's this phrase of the cognitive load, so that you can reduce the cognitive load for DevOps, developer, operating people drastically to just like, here's where you log in, here you put your DNS, here you put your container, here's your database, that's it. The platform does the rest. This is the promise of cloud provider, but the reality is not that the cloud provider does this. So
I'm not sure. Like, I have a question to you. Sorry, Lucas, if I cut you off. So, I have a question though. Like, if you have like different ways, a different way for, you said like 85% to do something, and then different something for the rest 15%. Doesn't it actually add on even if those 85% and the way it's done, it's super simple, like you said, it's a few buttons, but still, I will have that context switch. I don't know if it actually reduces the cognitive overload. Like, what do you think about that?
I think it will still do it, because it's not like that you have one team who needs to operate, let's say, 4,000 applications, right? You have typically DevOps teams or one team which operates one or two very large solutions. And then you have application teams which often operate like 50 or 100 applications. And these are the minor ones, right? So actually you can say like, hey, all of those, you can go to a very simple platform because they do not have a context switch. And maybe you can even free them up to educate them and teach them on the more complicated cloud provider. Because what currently happens is like everyone is like going to like, oh, I need to understand all the big cloud providers. I need to understand all the tooling around it. I need to understand open source and Kubernetes. And then you come on to the very difficult topics like disaster recovery and whatsoever, cross cloud wise. And then you need to run stuff in China or South Korea, which have different restrictions. It's a totally different platform, right? And Azure in Europe is totally different platform than Azure in China. I even would not call it Azure because it's like a totally different platform. So you can really free up people and give them to the complex parts, because the market is short on people, and companies do not have time and money and do not want, or the larger enterprises have problems with time and money to dedicate it to the people to educate them more further. So if you can shift a couple of people over to the more complicated part, you can release the pressure on the other hand side. Where you're right, when you're like a little company and you have like maybe, let's say, 10 applications or 20 applications and you have like 15 different platforms, okay, this doesn't make sense, right? But typically you will be also then quite often a digital native company. And when you're a digital native, it's way easier to serve and work with all these different providers, rather than when you're an engineering, insurance, banking company moving on to be pure digital service.
Yeah.
Because this is what in my opinion is like the very difficult switch, right?
Yeah. Because there, when you for banking and insurance and all of these type of companies, you have extra regulations, extra things that extra compliance, extra everything that you need to go through. And sometimes the people that you need to go through, they're not really even in on the details, and which makes it harder to explain and to reason with. But that's not our topic, but just saying.
Yeah, I mean, in one way, the concept of the golden path, which I think is what Kelsey Hightower was talking about, but I think in the end, the platform team ends up being responsible for all those different ways of deploying, and and there's only so much ground you can cover. I think that's part of the problem in a company. And so can you, I was just thinking as you were talking about like these little apps that we can deploy everywhere, and they have, a simple way of doing it on DigitalOcean, but then you're like, but is it secure? Is it this? Is it that? Is it backed up? Is it that, and all those other considerations that end up being the work. I mean, right now we've got SaaS proliferation in companies as well, right? As they were saying at HBR, everyone's using ChatGPT, whether you like it or not, with their own personal account. That's another SaaS that's in there. possibly leaking data or whatever it happens to be. People are using WhatsApp when they shouldn't be. People are, all those other factors that, that proliferation is there. And, so I'm curious how feasible it is to really have the simple platform versus the complex platform, in reality, even if it takes away 85% of the burden. But yeah, I guess my core thing is there are so many tools, as you said, Max, that you're still, the number of tools is the problem, even if each individual one is simple, right? It's the same as the microservice. Oh yeah, I wrote this really simple microservice that needs to speak to 400 other microservices to even do its job. It's not simple, right? Now it's just a distributed monolith or whatever it happens to be. And I think that's a really common issue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ricardo brought it already up, like looking at companies like Vercel or Netlify, they do it right? It's like, here's your source, build a container, run the application. I don't care about the rest. And if I want to have a DNS, then do this. You can cache, you can move it to the edge, whatsoever. So these are the very simple use cases. There are still a lot of those available. I think one of the big key feature which could be done here is like providing a kind of like VPN service for all of these platforms, so that enterprises who just wants to run something internally can also access it only as an internal solution. But then you solve a problem for a wide range of companies and have just a very simple approach to host these little things.
Absolutely, you guys brought very interesting topics. So we're a little over half of the time that we have, and I just wanted to touch on a topic. And just because Lucas talked about ChatGPT, I would like to have your take, because it's a hot topic. Everyone's talking about machine learning. Everyone's talking about AI. Everyone's talking about ChatGPT. Now Bard has been released to the audience. So I would like to have your take on what do you guys think how will AI in general influence cloud automation? Will it take all of our jobs? Will it enhance us? What's your take on it? So
I guess since you name checked me, I'll start.
Yeah, sure.
So I think ChatGPT, the way I think of it is sort of on the order of a change at the size of the internet, give or take. Not all the jobs go away, but yes, it's a big change. I do, however, think we're weeks away from a bit of disillusionment really creeping into the whole thing, because it actually, once the magic and the wow factor goes away, you're like, oh, okay, I'm seeing it making the same mistakes again and again. And so I think it's incredibly powerful, but it doesn't eliminate the need for developers or people. It's not giving great answers all the time, and it certainly makes stuff up all the time. So the code isn't, and that will improve. And, once it gets to, maybe there's less Kubernetes manifests out there, so the Kubernetes manifests aren't as good. But fundamentally, it's a synthesis of your Google search, possibly from 2021, right? That's what we're looking at. Now, is it going to speed up the development process massively? But like one of the I'll just dive into one little area, which is, let's say that product managers start, prompt engineering. They say, I want to build login to GitHub, not just login to Google. Type that in, and then it generates some code or some config or whatever it happens to be. If you're using Firebase, okay, it just reconfigures Firebase. That person is not at all qualified to decide whether that code is working. And so there's still this handoff process, right? There's still a platform team that has to get behind the ability to take that prompt, incorporate it into the code base, no matter how good the tooling is, that makes that then workable as part of the flow. And I think that's where things like AutoGPT and Baby AGI, are playing with that. And by the way, the results right now are not great. Infinite loops is really common. Well, at least that's what happened to me. And I can't even remember what I was trying to. I was trying to get it to advise me on a podcasting microphone, which I still don't have. Didn't get anywhere. So I think that's the big thing. This is a massive. I think we'll get to the stage where we can have synthetic devs, junior devs that help, that but they don't just put things live. We'll have new processes that need to go into place. And I do very much think that the coordination between someone who has an idea and the getting that to code live is a multi-person process. And that's the bit that no one's really thinking about. Right now, you're thinking about, I type it in and now I have code, right? If you think about what Replit is doing, which is another, I guess, hosting option, like you, the programmer, decide what you want to build, you get it built, you get it live, it's going, right? I think that's a niche use case.
It's always nice to get some additional information, but you really need to know what you do. The biggest problem is that, and actually I don't like that much ChatGPT for it. It's like it's convinced. It gives you a communication style of like, I know 100% what I'm doing way. And then when you know what you're asking for and you look on the answer, it's like, well, after 2 sentences, it's bullshit. I'm sorry, I'm just going to close it. So in the world of like infrastructure and cloud automation, I don't have seen there any good relevant response. Maybe it gives you an idea of how you could do it so that you can precisely search for like a few stuff. But if you say like, hey, write me a Terraform code for this API service, yeah, it will just put in like something and it's like, okay, thanks for practically nothing. For development itself, writing code, I really like Copilot, for example, because the output at least is working in some way. Like you can write like, hey, I need a function which does this and that and that. And then you get some kind of functions. I mean, the variables are trash and whatsoever, but you can replace it. You can even instruct it to write the variables correctly. That's not the point. But for the boilerplate structure, this is way, way better. And I actually looking way more forward for, I mean, there's still large language models, but they're very small comparison to the ChatGPT-4 version, is all those Llama and Alpaca versions, which accidentally got released and where the open source community have shown in just a few weeks that they can develop and solve problems big tech needs hundreds of millions of dollars for and still didn't find a solution. And they did it just in 1-2 weeks. And bringing this open source language models so close to ChatGPT and BART as on the level of quality, that I think there we will really see like not maybe revolutionizing, but really helpful outputs, which then are dedicated and trained specifically for infrastructure, specifically for cloud, because we now have a source code for it with which we can work on. We don't need to start by zero. We have already a model that can understand whatever is written, and this we can train for creating better output. So waiting for the next startup for infrastructure, AI, whatever, thinking based on Llama and so on.
Yeah, that could be
just to quote ChatGPT, apologies for the confusion. It appears there was a mistake in the provided example. I was trying to get Kubernetes.
Oh my God! I asked some questions in Clojure, which is a functional programming language. It's pretty niche, but it's really good for super high performance, like 100 billion events per day performance that I had in a previous company where I worked at. So I was like trying to play around with Clojure, and the confidence level was so high, and I was using that confidence. I pasted it into my terminal, and then it was like, what? It's not even close. And I was so, confident back at the result that I didn't even take the time to look at the code first. I was just like, let's see what happens. And I'm saying, I agree with both of you so much that if somebody is not experienced enough, so this was for my play, for like a side project that I do at home, so I didn't mind just pasting it right into my code and trying. But what would happen if I did something that is company-wide and I didn't understand, or I didn't have the ability to understand what I'm actually doing, and I just used that confidence that I got from the AI? This could be horrible results. And I'm waiting for the day that they will have good results on Clojure. Just saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And just adding an anecdote like the one that you just told, I recently saw in a company that I advise for, 2 engineers just getting something from ChatGPT, just pasting it, and it didn't work, and they were like, okay, and then it was something simple. So they was like, okay, we'll just ask ChatGPT, it will prompt it out, we'll just put it in. It didn't work. And then I saw 2 senior engineers taking a whole afternoon just to figure it out, what the hell was going on. they could have written that function in like half an hour with tests or something like that, but it took them an entire afternoon, and it was something. It was a type conversion. It was something that was being wrongly converted, but it
Not
took them so
everybody.
yeah. So exactly.
Yeah,
So
the
going
explanation isn't good enough, right? So you don't
yeah,
quite know
exactly.
what's wrong, and you're just and you've got what looks like a good basis. But look, I think once you realize the limitations, you start to discount the confidence. Just like if your friend who tells you things that are crap, right? You know, you realize what you're getting. So I think some of these are early, you know, inexperience with the tool, and you're not going to do another closure function without looking at it, are you? But I've had really good luck for, you know, things like just algorithms I don't want to write, you know, or, you know, like I wanted to, this is a really silly example, but I wanted to grab different versions of Mac ports to, you know, so that I could, for my CI, so I could use the right version for the version of the OS I'm using. So I had it write that, because I'm like, detect what the OS is, get the right download, pull it down. You know, it was just tedious code I didn't want to write. And that was really helpful.
Yeah.
Sounds great. And just to close on this topic, and following on what Lucas said, I really think that what it will not replace developers, but it will enhance them, right? And if we look at our companies and we do look at our product backlogs, it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So we need more people. If you can make people faster, maybe we can attack some of those things, because I don't know, I can produce code faster, I can ship it faster, I can put in front of you users, I can iterate it faster. So I think, at least for the near future, I think it will empower some developers. Developers will start getting used to these tools, be it ChatGPT, GitHub Copilot, Bard, whatever it is, and they will probably, Blake, in the long run will make them more productive, but I don't see the extension of the developer work anytime soon. So we just have a few more minutes, but I wanted to close this with your opinions on what would be the future, or what you would like to be the future around cloud automation. What do you see in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, something like that? What is your opinion? Where do you think this cloud automation is going from? Are we completely going to automate all the things? It will be this process of I just declare something. Is this notion that we're not starting to talk a lot about between infrastructure as code versus infrastructure as software? Where do you see this field evolving? And whoever wanna start, the floor is open. I know that I threw you a curveball, but we still have a few minutes, so feel free to jump in.
Well, it's a big question, right? I mean, on the one hand side, like I hope to see more organizations be more open what they're also doing on the infrastructure side, because this is still like kind of quite closed quite often, but it doesn't bring any business advantages, right? So if we talk about infrastructure and what we ever do there, it's not like the competitive advantage to another company. Maybe if you scale better whatsoever, you save some money or what so on. Okay, fine, cool. But like, it's not like the intellectual property which you really want to protect, I think, because this happens in the applications. So I hope into this direction that a lot of end users will open up more what they have done, because then you also have, like, and this is in the second part in it, more sources for AI to train on, to look at, and to understand what works good, what works not so good, so that you get maybe suiting and better models, which then, and that this is the third part in it, really helps also on the cloud automation, right? As I said, I do not want to get rid of my infrastructure job on the one hand side, but it would be so much pleasant to just like make kind of chat ops, describe as a good cup of coffee beside how the infrastructure should look like, and then it's just going to happen, rather than to code it down, to Terraform it down, to clone wherever else repositories together, or get it out of your blueprint shelf, and then you need to fix all the versions and what so on. So just tell like, this isn't that what I want to have, just do it, and then you can review it. So not sure if you're going there, but I hope the direction
I like the chatbot one. I would like a chatbot that I would say, okay, so this is my app is written in whatever. I want you to containerize it, export, port, I don't know, whatever. I want a Cassandra database or something like that. Please build it for me.
I've seen one guy who built it in Excel.
I think that's very likely, right? With the chat AI, you know, like that it will be able to do lots of that. I think though that the I spoke about it at the beginning, but the future of cloud and really is that things like HA, things like scaling, a lot of these things get abstracted away and that you don't have to deal with them. What's interesting is though, as long as all this is usage based, it's like how can you really abstract away how big your database is if it's costing you hundreds of thousands of dollars a month or whatever. So some of the infinitely scalable vision that I have really ends up landing in the CFO's problem, right? Which is you've blown your budget. And I think that's part of it, is part of why we have to be so intricate is because the service is also, too metered. But I think maybe that's a side problem, but the core problem is the security's got to be built in for you to really abstract away the auditability, the backups, the logging. All these things kind of have to be built in an effective way for us to get rid of that detailed stuff. It's all the illities or whatever you want to call them. But I really think that's going to happen. That companies don't want to spend the amount they're spending on managing the cloud, but they have to, right? Platform teams have really terrible tools right now. Platform teams need better tools, and those are in many different domains.
Yeah. So on my end, I think that what I hope to see is I already see that in the few companies that I worked with or worked at, that there's a lot of interest in FinOps, like looking into the numbers. And I'm continuing a little bit of what you said there, Lucas, like looking into the numbers, understanding where the money is getting thrown away, where the developers who are not really good with understanding the cost of resources. So either getting them to understand that or getting their hands out of those areas. And I think this is like a place that a lot of companies are investing in and will continue investing, because it's not just about getting more money to come in, but it's also not spending everything that you have on bazillion instances that somebody that no longer works here opened and deployed, So that's another thing that I hope to see at least.
Awesome. So we're just out of time. So I want to take this opportunity to thank this panel. I learned a lot. So I had a few questions, and I took this opportunity also to pose these questions to this panel and learn a little bit from all of them. So I hope you all enjoyed this discussion. It was really interesting for me. So I hope it was for myself. And I want to thank all the panelists that were here, just sharing their ideas, sharing their thoughts. We all really appreciate it. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. So have a great day. And thank you very much for attending.
Really good.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This is all we got. Remember. This is all we got. Remember the revolution in our minds. This is all we got.
Lock me out of this life institution. I am angry and I am illusions. Yes, I hate, but it's not a solution. Try my best, but I'm just a human. Oh, we don't need to say